smile. Make it a smile.
This event takes place within the context of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that will be observed on the 10th of December 2023. In September of this year, in connection with the release of a new United Nations Human Rights Office report entitled How to Effectively Implement the Right to Participate in Public Affairs, a spotlight on people of African descent, the High Commissioner for Human Rights stressed that states need to recognize that behind contemporary forms of racism, dehumanization, and exclusion is a failure to acknowledge responsibilities for enslavement. End of quote. Since its foundation, the United Nations has been guided by the principle that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights and have the potential to contribute constructively to the development and well-being of their societies. 75 years ago, for the first time, the international community agreed on a set of common values and acknowledged that rights are inherent to every single human being enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a blueprint for international human rights norms. And it is said that it's the most translated document on the planet. It can be found in 500 languages. The 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights provides an opportunity for us to reflect and commit to practice actions to advance equality and combat racism and racial discrimination. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the Universities Studying Slavery for collaborating with the outreach program on the Transatlantic Slave Trade and Slavery in the United Nations Department of Communications to host this important event. This consortium comprises of 100 global institutions of higher learning focused on sharing best practices and guiding principles as they engage in truth-telling educational projects focused on human bondage and the legacies of racism in their histories. This collective was created out of the University of Virginia's President's Commission on Slavery and the university to ensure that UVA's important work would spread beyond Virginia and to respond to the calls for guidance from other universities.
Peace TV reporters have been active at the UN headquarters since 2010, the age of former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. They are often invited to gather pictures and news about high-level meetings and events at the UN headquarters. Our news reports have, in part, kept the international community up to date with the work of different governments so that people everywhere will know the great efforts and contributions of the UN to world peace, international affairs, and multilateralism.
Hannah Jones has spent her career investigating racial inequality and injustice, and her reporting has earned her the MacArthur Fellowship, also known as the Genius Grant, as well as the Peabody Award, 2 George Polk Awards, and the National Magazine Award 3 times. Yeah, I'm not going to cut down her many accomplishments. She also serves as the Knight Chair of Race and Journalism at Howard University, where she founded the Center for Journalism and Democracy. Hannah Jones is also the co-founder of the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, which seeks to increase the number of investigative reporters and editors of color. And in 2022, she opened the 1619 Freedom School, a free after-school literacy program in her hometown of Waterloo, Iowa. And amazingly, she is not tired. Also a tireless advocate is Laura Trevelyan, a journalist who is an anchor and a correspondent for BBC News. Laura is an honorary associate fellow at the P.J. Patterson Institute for African Caribbean Advocacy at the University of the West Indies and a trustee of the Trevelyan Grenada Reparations Fund.
Is it on now? Oh, it's on now. Okay. Always good to see you. Great to meet you. Thank you to the United Nations for hosting me again. I thought maybe after my reparations speech I might never be invited back, so glad to be back here. So much of the work that we do, and even work that the United Nations has been doing around the humanity are about power. The reason the 1619 Project exists, the reason I imagine so much of your scholarship exists, is because people in power have been able to shape what we commonly think of as history, but what is really memory. Because all of the history that I write about, that you write about, it happened. We just don't learn about it, or we learn about it through a very particular lens. And there's a reason your job wants to offer you health insurance. And yet, because of the nation, because of the stories that power shaped, the narrative that power shaped about who we are, we accept these things because we actually think these things are a sign of our freedom. We actually think that these things are the things that make us great as a society. So what our work is doing is trying to trouble those narratives and to really wrest from the hands of power who gets to shape our collective understanding, our collective identity, and therefore what we collectively accept in our society.
Thank you for that. Laura, I'm going to ask you a similar question building off of Nicole's response about how you think your work also seeks to address these power dynamics and the ways that our collective understanding and the historical memory of slavery is being shaped.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you, Nicole. It's such a pleasure to be on stage with both of you, and as someone who was the BBC's UN correspondent here some time ago, it's a pleasure to be back here. And I will say that when I read Nicole's initial article in the New York Times Magazine, it was like a lightning bolt, because you explained something to me that I hadn't even really realised. In the 1619 Project, you exposed how slavery is at the heart of America's founding. But to me, you illuminated how American slavery is British slavery, and how it was all the same thing. And yet, in school, I was taught that Britain abolished slavery in 1834, long before those terrible Americans who took such a long time to do it. So I wasn't even taught that in the sense that America was a colony, and therefore British American slavery was British slavery. None of these, so you joined the dots in a way. It's so obvious, and yet it's not how we were taught, to your point about power. Now, the British writer George Orwell wrote that Britain is like a wealthy family, and I'm paraphrasing, which feels guilty about its hidden source of income. Compensated in 1834 not to be enslaved. They were compensated for the loss of what was termed their property, because that was the intellectual justification for the dehumanizing system of industrial slavery, was to think of people just as property. So, therefore, logically, when it was abolished, of course, the slave owners had to receive compensation, otherwise the bill would never have got through Parliament. There would have been no, this is just how things work. So when you see, I'll put online the details of the 46,000 claims in 1834 from all these little old ladies writing in and claiming for their enslaved Africans that they owned across the British Caribbean. When you see that in black and white, to Nicole's point, the narrative is transformed, and you realise how the powerful wish to conceal this narrative because it's ugly, as George Orwell said, it's shameful. And then as soon as slavery was abolished in Britain, where people have known this legacy, have known the truth for so long, and yet have really essentially been forced to profit from British tourism, to have daily flights from British Airways and Virgin, and to put a cheery face on it, because this is how money is made. You don't want to insult or upset the tourists who are coming 3,000 miles to see you and to provide you with a livelihood. So there's so much in it that is hard and it's complicated. But when I went to Grenada, I was just so delighted to email Nicole, another important Nicole, but Nicole Philip Dow, this time, Vice Chair of Grenada's Reparations Committee, and I emailed Nicole. She a descendant of the enslaved in Grenada, me a descendant of enslavers, and I said, oh Nicole, I would love to come and talk to you and make this BBC documentary, and I pressed send, not knowing quite what would happen. And Nicole just wrote back with a smiley face emoji. And goes, where have you been all this time? Yes, come on, let's get going. And through that, through Nicole, Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Maureen Shepherd, PJ Patterson, the multitude of Caribbean intellectuals who since capitalism and slavery have been thinking, articulating, generating these ideas. You know, CARICOM has a 10-point plan for reparatory justice. Our family adapted that for us with the help of the Caribbean. It all begins with an apology and then repair. So I hope that between all of us we can begin to challenge the narrative that for hundreds of years we've all absorbed.
Thank you for that. So
Thank you. So when I hear a question, and I appreciate where that last question is coming from, which is these problems are centuries old, they're so systemic. What can I do? Well, as an individual, besides sending money to my Cash App, just kidding, no, just kidding. As an individual, what you need to do is join and use your collective power to push through a reparations bill. That it's not just about, because the thing is, we are telling you what we need as descendants of slavery. But you want to decide, well, I will give to this educational program because I think that is a worthy way of repair. No, repair means the people who had the harm done to them get to say how they get their repair. And what we are saying is we want financial reparations. And so please call your congresspeople or wherever your legislative body is in your country and push them to pass the reparations bill. We actually don't need to study this anymore. I can cite you all of the studies that have already been done. People have already made calculations. What we don't have is the political will to actually do what is right. Just think again. If someone came to your house and stole your wealth, and stole your home, and stole your labor, and then they said, you know what, you're right. We will acknowledge that we committed this great crime against you, and that is all that you are owed. How would you respond to that? So the fact that we think all that is required is an acknowledgement, which most countries don't even want to do that. No, you have to now repay me for what was taken. And I'm sorry if you were living in my house after you took it. I'm sorry that that's uncomfortable for you to have to move out of the house that you stole from me, but that is what is required if you truly want justice. So when I hear these questions, I always ask myself, do you really want justice? Or do you want to feel better after leaving this conversation? Because if you really want justice, there is going to be a little bit of discomfort and the giving up of something that you did not personally earn. So that's how I answer that. Thank you.
Laura, final thoughts, answers to any of the questions?
Yes, I'll be quick because I see it's 2:30. But the question about is there some kind of transnational study? Not that I'm aware of, but what a brilliant idea, because data is power, as it showed when UCL put online the database of compensation paid to the British slave owners, which revealed to my family and many others exactly how we had profited through inherited wealth. I will just say that as a fellow at the P.J. Patterson Institute for African Caribbean Advocacy, I've been discussing an idea with Professor Hilary Beckles, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, and P.J. Patterson, about the archives in the Caribbean, these incredible archives in Barbados, Jamaica, Antigua, which now are 400 years old. The archives, the records of plantations, the slave registers, ship manifests, information which could help descendant communities know where they came from. And shouldn't these archives, which by the way are at risk of being destroyed by the next hurricane to hit the Caribbean, shouldn't they be online? Shouldn't they be available to everybody? Shouldn't they have historical context with them as a public information tool? And now you've got the idea of the transnational database. And I just leave you with a final thought, which is from Professor Hilary Beckles, who really has been such a guru to our family and now to so many others, who said reparations is going to be the greatest political movement of the 21st century because it is a movement of love, compassion, and healing. And I'll leave you with that.
Thank you again. Please give them another round of applause. So I would love for everyone here and those online, if you can fill out a survey that would be helpful for the United Nations Department of Global Communications. We kindly ask you to scan the QR code on the screen. There's a super quick survey that will take no more than 1 or 2 minutes. For the online audience, you can click on the link in the chat and take some time to complete that survey. Meanwhile, while you are filling out the survey, I'm just going to take time again to thank the audience for attending and for your really thoughtful engagement through your questions in person, through those online. Really sorry we couldn't get to everyone's thoughts and questions, but certainly are appreciative of your engagement with us. And just again, thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you again to both of you, Nicole and Laura, for such an incredible conversation. It's wonderful to pick alongside with you and learn from you. So with that, everybody, we're closing the day. Thank you so much again, and hope we can have more.